Hello everyone, welcome back. Tonight, the first thing you notice isn't chains, it's the draft. Cold air sneaking in like it has a key. Medieval torture rooms weren't designed by evil geniuses. They were just basements nobody wanted. Stone, damp, and perfect for storing barrels. And somehow, the barrels got replaced with people. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe to join our global community. Wherever you're watching from, drop your city and your local time in the comments. It's how we turn history into a conversation that belongs to all of us. Headphones on, symmetry achieved, underwear secured. Congratulations, you're officially ready for history, our way. Now, your workday begins with a noise. The hinges, you push the stone door, and it squeals. Not scary, just annoying. Long, high-pitched, like a goose you stepped on by accident. By the third squeal, everyone upstairs already knows. The torturer's in. No need for a punch clock when your entrance doubles as a sound effect. Inside, the room is colder than outside. The walls drip with condensation. The floor is uneven enough to trip you if you're not careful. The smell hits you next. Damp rock, leftover smoke, and something faintly sour that refuses to leave. If Yankee Candle existed back then, this scent would have been called medieval basement. Torches try their best, but their best isn't good. They spit, they pop, they smoke. Too close, you choke. Too far, you can't see. There's no sweet spot. The light flickers, painting orange shadows that make ropes look like snakes, and benches look like people. Which is fun, if you like jump scares. The soundscape, a constant mix. Water dripping, wood creaking, rats scurrying, like they own the place, chains clinking faintly, even when no one touches them. It's less symphony of dread and more bad plumbing with extra metal. Your co-workers wait in the corners. Tools, not people. A rack leaning, like it's tired. Ropes piled in the corner, like they're sulking. Clamps stacked neatly, but with the enthusiasm of soggy firewood. None of it shines, none of it looks dramatic. If you moved it all upstairs, it could pass for a carpenter's shed. And that's the truth nobody likes to hear. Torture equipment wasn't all spikes and legends. Most of it looked like regular tools. Saws, wedges, iron collars. The same blacksmith who made nails and ploughs made shackles on the side. One sickle, one hinge, one set of manacles. Next customer, please. So your job starts not with terror, but with maintenance. Oil here, sharpen there, check the ropes, rewind them neatly, curse under your breath when they tangle. Break a handle mid-session, and the judge won't call it mercy. He'll call it incompetent. The city made sure you had supplies. Ledgers mention linseed oil, fresh timber, new rope. Listed right between buy onions for guards and repair Southgate. Bureaucracy has no sense of drama. You're just another expense like bread or nails. Picture a clerk reading it aloud. 3 candles, 2 ropes, onions for supper, 1 wheel adjustment. Nobody flinches. Torture prep, filed neatly between groceries and home repair. And that's your morning. You don't start with screams, you start with squeaky hinges and oil rags. Think of it as medieval IT support. Your job is making sure nothing crashes mid-performance. The smell gets worse as you work. Oil mixed with torch smoke, mixed with damp stone. It clings to your hands. Soap is rare. Water helps a little. Sand works better, but leaves your skin raw. You could explain the smell to neighbours, but neighbours don't usually ask. Breaks happen. They're not glamorous. A chunk of bread in the corner. Maybe some cheese if luck's on your side. You balance it on a barrel. Chew fast and hope the rats don't stage a coup. Sometimes there's ale, usually flat. Hydration is hydration. A few torturers tried decorating their workspace. A stool, a blanket, maybe initials carved into stone. It didn't help. The mildew was undefeated. It showed up early, worked late, and claimed every corner of the room. Visitors expecting horror often looked disappointed. They wanted spikes, drama, thunderclaps. What they got was a damp basement with ropes on hooks, and the faint sound of rats having a better time. Honestly, the scariest thing was probably the smell. And here's the secret. Before anything dramatic happens, this is it. Before the screams, squeaky hinges. Before the confessions, oiling chains. Before the myth, checking a clamp for splinters. It isn't poetry, it isn't legend, it's maintenance. And it starts again, tomorrow. The city pays you. The city also avoids you. That's the paradox. Your wage arrives neatly, written in the books right between buy onions and fix the market roof. 1 coin for the torturer, 3 for onions. Both keep the town running. Guess which one makes people happier at dinner? Still, the money is steady. A farmer risks frost, a trader risks bandits, you risk blisters from hauling chains. And somehow, your odds are better. Officially, you're a secure employee. Unofficially, you're the last person anyone invites over for soup. The councilman who approves your paycheck, he'll cross the road to avoid greeting you. It's not hatred, it's self-preservation. No one wants to explain at home why they were chatting with the guy who oils restraints for a living. Church offers no break. You kneel, and suddenly pews around you open like magic. People slide away without a word. Holiness is one thing. Sitting shoulder to shoulder with the city torturer is another. It's easier to pray from 3 benches over. Kids are less subtle. They point, they whisper. They say your hands jingle, even when you're carrying bread. Some dare each other to touch your door and run. The boldest knock, then flee shrieking as if chased by ghosts. To you, it's just more cardio you didn't ask for. Adults handle it politely, too politely. They smile at you in the market, then immediately switch topics. Grain prices, weather, mud depth, anything neutral. If conversation was stew, yours would be broth. Thin, lukewarm, gone fast. Housing solves part of the problem. Many torturers get houses on the edge of town, sometimes by the tannery, sometimes next to empty fields. Not because it's scenic, because no one else wanted the property. Smells of boiling hides, double as social camouflage. Your home is simple, roof patched with whatever wood the council found. Door that shuts only if you slam it twice. The bed creaks, like a violin being tuned by someone with no talent. It's not glamorous, but it's sturdy. Medieval Zillow would list it as affordable, secluded, neighbours optional. Meals are practical. Bread, broth, maybe beans if trade is good. You eat fast. If family sits with you, they don't ask about your shift. If you eat alone, the silence is predictable. Dinner conversation is either short or non-existent. Nobody wants details about rope inventory, but your stomach fills. That's what the coin buys. Steady food, decent shoes, fewer worries about famine. On paper, you're lucky. In practice, you're radioactive. Evenings slide into cleanup. Tools need wiping, oiling, checking, chains recoiled, wood examined for cracks. Rust is the only enemy you can't interrogate. Judges don't care if you lose sleep. They care if a wheel stalls in the middle of proceedings. So you polish, you stretch ropes, listening for strands that snap like bad lute strings. You test clamps, making sure they don't collapse mid-use. It's dull, necessary work, maintenance, not menace. If anyone peeked in, they'd see a handyman, with very questionable clients. The air thickens with torch smoke. It sticks to the walls in black streaks. Never cleaned, never fading. Visitors later might call it atmosphere. You call it lungs full of soot. Free decoration with a health tax. By the time you close the dungeon, the street outside is winding down. Merchants pack up stalls, sweeping crumbs into the mud. Chickens scavenge like feathered thieves. Guards lean on spears, already dreaming of ale. You blend in by being the one nobody talks to. People glance, then they glance away. Some mutter prayers under their breath. Others tug kids closer. You're not dangerous right now, but you're still that guy. The job doesn't clock out when you do. The walk home is short. Mud grabs your boots. Lamps flicker in windows. Laughter escapes taverns. You pass it all, without slowing. No one waves, no one asks how your day went. Medieval small talk doesn't stretch that far. At home, the lamp sputters as you light it. You sit on a stool, tear bread in half, chew in silence, maybe patch a boot if the leather split. Maybe just stare at the wall. The quiet is heavy, not tragic, just heavy. Like everyone in town took your social life and filed it under not our problem. Sometimes you almost miss the kids' pranks. At least they broke the silence. Even a rock tossed at your door felt like contact. Sleep comes early. Straw mattress, thin blanket, candle guttering low. You close your eyes, and what lingers isn't screams. It's the ordinary sounds, rope stretching, clamps creaking, smoke crackling, maintenance noises, your bedtime playlist, tomorrow morning. Same duties, same looks at church, same clerk adding your name, between onions and nails. It's routine. Unloved, but routine. And the city keeps paying. By the time evening rolls in, the dungeon feels more like a storage room that overstayed its welcome. The torches spit, smoke crawls up the walls, and everything smells like damp rock mixed with fried candle wax. Not scary, just uncomfortable, like sitting too long in a room where someone boiled socks. Your last job of the day isn't interrogating, it's housekeeping. Chains need checking, ropes need rewinding, wood clamps need tapping, to make sure they don't split tomorrow. It's the same rhythm every night, and nobody claps when you're done. The clerk hovers in the corner, scratching his pen across paper. He doesn't even look up when you pull a chain tight. Still holding, he asks. Still holding, you answer. Better than my roof, he mutters, and keeps writing. Ropes, though, are the real enemy. You roll them neatly, hang them properly, and by the next day, they've tied themselves into a knot worthy of a sailor on holiday. It's not sabotage, it's just rope logic. You stop being surprised after the 100th time. You lean on a clamp and listen for cracks. A good one makes a dull thunk. A bad one sounds like someone chewing stale bread. Tonight, most of them thunk. That means tomorrow won't start with an awkward apology to the judge. The smell of oil and smoke settles in your clothes. You can scrub your hands raw, but neighbours will still wrinkle their noses when you pass. They don't need to ask what you do. Their noses file the report before you say a word. When everything's back in place, you sweep the floor. Not to make it pretty, it'll never be pretty, but to keep the rats from thinking they own the place. They still show up anyway, bold enough to squeak at you like they're complaining about working conditions. Finally, you shove the door shut. It doesn't creak this time. It lets out a noise. That sounds like a goat asking for a raise. Loud, unashamed, echoing down the alley. Subtle exits aren't part of the job description. Outside, the town is busy pretending not to see you. Merchants are counting coins. Kids are playing tag until someone's mother yells. Guards lean on spears, nodding like they've been awake all shift. You walk past all of it, part of the scene, but not invited into it. 2 teenagers whisper as you pass. That's him. No way. Who else smells like smoke and rope? They laugh nervously. You keep walking. The tavern spills light and noise onto the street. You could go in, nothing stopping you, but everyone knows how fast laughter would die if you stepped through the door. The thought alone is enough to keep you moving. Home isn't far. The roof holds together with more luck than carpentry. The door shuts if you slam it twice. Inside, a lamp sputters, a stool wobbles, and dinner waits. Bread, maybe soup, sometimes cheese, if fortune smiled. If family's there, they keep conversation short. A nod, a plate, silence. Nobody wants to hear about your day. You don't want to explain it. If you eat alone, the silence is heavier, but easier. Bread disappears either way. After dinner comes small chores, fixing a strap, trimming a candle, scraping mud from boots, normal tasks that don't raise eyebrows, if you were anyone else. But in your hands, even a sewing needle looks suspicious. The house creaks as it settles for the night. Dogs bark in the distance. A cart rattles past. wheels squealing like an out-of-tune fiddle. Nothing dramatic, just background noise, for a life nobody wants to talk about. You remember a prisoner once asked you mid-session, voice shaky, "Do you enjoy this?" You wiped oil off your fingers and answered honestly, "No." He blinked. "Then why do it?" You shrugged. "Because onions don't buy themselves." Even he laughed briefly, before the clerk told him to shut up. That's how it goes. The job looks terrifying from outside. From inside, it's mostly maintenance, awkward silences, and a smell that follows you home. Bed is a straw mattress that complains when you lie down. A thin blanket that pretends to help. And a pillow that could double as a brick. Comfort isn't the point. Rest is. You close your eyes. What plays in your head isn't screams. Screams fade. What lingers are the ordinary sounds. Chains rattling faintly, ropes tightening, torches crackling. That's the real lullaby, whether you like it or not. Sometimes you dream of being anyone else. A baker, a farmer, even a guy sweeping streets. Jobs where neighbours wave instead of whisper. You wake up and the silence is back. The clerk will still write your name tomorrow, right next to onions and nails. And the door, whether it moans like a goat or squeals like a fiddle, will announce another shift. Nobody talks about. Evening doesn't care if you're tired. It shows up anyway. The torches sputter, smoke crawling along the ceiling. You're the last one still fussing with tools, because if you leave oil off the clamps, tomorrow you'll regret it. No glory, no thanks. Just another round of wiping, testing, stacking. The clerk yawns so hard, you think his jaw might pop. "You done yet?" he mumbles. "Almost," you reply, rolling a rope that's trying to tie itself into knots. Good. Paperwork's easier if nothing breaks tomorrow. That's his only worry. Forms, not screams, not guilt, just ink and lines. You hang the last chain, give the room one final glance, and snuff out the torch. The flame dies with a weak pfft, like it just gave up on life. You mutter, "Same," then close the door. Tonight the door doesn't squeal. It makes a noise closer to a donkey clearing its throat. Loud, awkward, unforgettable. Every evening is a new sound effect. If you had to list your daily soundtrack, the door would be track 1. Outside, the town is limping toward bedtime. Merchants pack their wares. Kids are still yelling, even though mothers shout at them to stop. A drunk sings badly near the well, his voice cracking like a chicken with ambition. Nobody listens. Nobody cares. You walk past and people notice. They always notice. A woman pulling water from the well glances once, then looks away fast. A man tugging a cart suddenly finds the ground very interesting. They don't say anything, but silence can be loud too. Halfway home, 2 teenagers whisper behind you. "That's him. Don't stare. I'm not. He smells like torches." You could turn around. You don't. Let them whisper. You're used to being their bedtime story. The tavern glows warm, spilling laughter and the smell of roasted meat. Tempting. But you know how fast that laughter would vanish if you stepped inside. The silence would be sharper than any blade. You keep walking. At your house, the door sticks twice before it shuts. Inside, a lamp, a stool that wobbles, and bread that looks older than you. You chew anyway. Hunger doesn't ask for softness. If there's soup, you drink it fast. If there's family, they talk about goats, rain, laundry, anything except your shift. If you're alone, the silence fills the room like smoke. One of the kids once asked, "Papa, why don't neighbours come over?" You answered, "Because neighbours have noses." He laughed. Your wife didn't. After dinner comes chores, fixing a strap, scraping mud from boots, trimming candle wicks. It's nothing dramatic, but it keeps hands busy. And busy is better than thinking too much. The neighbour's dog barks at shadows again. You shout through the wall, "Yes, we all know you're brave." The dog barks louder, claiming victory. Another routine you didn't sign up for. The lamp sputters. You curse softly, tap it, and it steadies. You wonder if lamps sigh when they see you too. Finally, bed. Straw crunches under you like dry leaves. The blanket covers only half your body, but that's tradition now. The pillow is more rock than cushion. Comfort doesn't live here. Only sleep does, if you're lucky. Eyes closed, your brain replays the day. Not the prisoners. That fades faster than people think. What stays are the small noises, the rope that refused to coil, the clerk's pen scratching, the door's donkey impression. It's a lullaby you didn't request, but you get it nightly. Sometimes you dream of being anyone else. A baker handing out rolls, a farmer waving from a field, even a sweeper humming down the street. In dreams, neighbours nod, and no one whispers. Then you wake up, and it's onions, nails, and your name back in the ledger. A prisoner once asked you, voice shaky, "Do you enjoy this?" You told him flatly, "No." "Then why?" he pushed. You shrugged. "Because goats don't pay rent, and the city does." Even he chuckled, despite himself. That's the job. Not legend, not fire and brimstone, just routines, silence, and jokes that only half land. Tomorrow morning the clerk will file your name again, right after onions, right before nails. History will keep pretending you're just another expense. And when the door moans, squeals, or coughs like an old donkey, you'll know. Shift number whatever has officially begun. Segment Satu ends there. And next, we'll open a different door. The story of how someone even becomes this person in the first place. Spoiler. No kid ever says, "When I grow up, I want to oil chains for a living." No child ever bragged, "When I grow up, I want to spend my life in a basement with ropes." At least not while parents were listening. The role usually landed on people the way mud lands on shoes. Unwanted, sticky, and hard to scrape off. The city didn't post job ads. There was no booth at the fair. What there was, a council table, some muttering, and a finger pointed at the unlucky name. "Who'll do it?" one official might ask. Silence. Everyone's suddenly fascinated by the floor. Then another shrugs. That butcher swings an axe well enough. And just like that, congratulations, you've been hired. Butchers, tanners, grave diggers, anyone already handling things most people didn't like, were prime candidates. You smelled odd. You worked with your hands. You weren't sitting at feasts with noblemen. Perfect resume. Sometimes the city went with tradition. If your father did it, congratulations, you're next. No parchment needed. Bloodline was enough. A German record flatly lists, the son continues his father's office. Office, more like inheritance nobody wanted. Some kids resisted. One apparently told the council, "I'd rather herd pigs," the clerk, without looking up, replied, "Good. We need pigs in the dungeon too." Resistance collapsed faster than cheap rope. There were contracts, sure. Don't imagine a ceremony. Just parchment, ink, and a wax blob pretending to be important. The duties were vague, the pay exact. Some even read, "He shall do what is required," which covers everything from oiling chains to explaining to your wife why neighbours won't wave anymore. Training? Forget it. No academy, no manuals. The first day wasn't orientation, it was improvisation. Someone shoved a tool at you and said, "Here, hold this." Then a judge barked orders. That was the tutorial. One apprentice whispered nervously, "How do I know if I'm doing it right?" The clerk, still writing, said, "If the judge doesn't yell, you're fine." That was the curriculum. Sometimes the job skipped bloodline and landed on outsiders. A travelling torturer would be hired because locals refused. Imagine arriving in a new town hoping for bread and ale, only to be told, "Surprise, you're our new basement manager." No tour of the sights, straight to the cellar. Occasionally, perks sweetened the deal. Free housing, fewer taxes, maybe a patch of land. But don't picture a mansion. It was usually a house shoved near the wall, far from neighbours. Spacious? Yes. Social? Never. Rarely, someone volunteered. Usually, men already half shunned. Gravediggers, butchers, loners, who realised the job wouldn't cost them friends because they didn't have any left. The city called it service. Everyone else called it desperation. Attempts to refuse were legendary, if short-lived. One man bolted from the council hall shouting, "I won't do it!" Guards dragged him back minutes later. He signed with shaking hands. Quitting before starting was not a career option. The council's reasoning was practical. Somebody had to do it, and it wasn't going to be their cousin. The job needed strong hands, not noble blood. Better to hire someone replaceable and pay them just enough to keep them fed. Families often made the story awkward. Dinner conversations included lines like, "Father, tomorrow you'll come with me, son." "Where? The fields, father." "The dungeon, son." "Can I go back to the fields, father?" "No." And that was it. The trade passed down like a family recipe nobody liked. For recruits, the first month taught fast lessons. The city clerk's notes mattered more than your nerves. Tools broke more often than they should. Everyone in town knew your name, but pretended they didn't. One rookie even asked the judge, mid-session, "Do I use the small clamp or the large one?" The judge glared. The clerk muttered, "Use whichever doesn't snap." That was quality control. By the end of the year, the recruit had stopped asking questions. He knew when to oil, when to stand back, when to nod silently. Nobody praised him. Nobody shook his hand. But the coin showed up, and that was enough. That's how the job began. Not with ambition, but with paperwork and pressure. Cities always needed someone, and someone always wished it wasn't them. The origin story of a torturer isn't heroic or tragic. It's bureaucratic. A council sighs, a clerk writes, a man signs, and suddenly a life has been redirected into a cellar with ropes that won't coil properly. Not destiny, not calling, just civic administration deciding your career. Training in theory sounds official. Training in practice was, stand there, hold this, don't drop it. There was no academy, no manual with diagrams, no instructor in a robe saying, "Lesson 1. Instead, the senior torturer shoved a rope in your hand and barked, "Tighter." If it slipped, you got yelled at. If it held, nobody said thanks. That was graduation. The first week was always messy. One rookie nearly tied a knot so loose the prisoner slipped free. The judge exploded, the clerk nearly swallowed his quill, and the rookie learned the fastest way to ruin your day was to look incompetent. "You want to keep your job?" the senior hissed later. "Yes." "Then stop tying knots like you're wrapping cheese." Lesson absorbed. Beyond ropes there was paperwork. Not glamorous paperwork, but constant. The clerk couldn't do everything alone. Someone had to copy lists, candles bought, chains repaired, buckets replaced. A surviving record from one town, literally lists. 2 new ropes, 1 stool, 3 chickens for the guard's dinner. Imagine learning calligraphy just to write about poultry. Some apprentices tried to argue, "I thought my job was, torture?" The clerk snapped back. "And who do you think pays for the rope you just ruined?" Administrative reality. Half the work was budgets. Then came cleaning duty. After each session, everything needed scrubbing, wiping, and restacking. Tools looked terrifying, but they behaved like spoiled livestock, unruly unless cared for daily. If you skipped oil, chains rusted. Skipped scrubbing, wood cracked. And judges didn't accept maintenance issues as an excuse. A rookie once whined, "Why do we clean every day?" The answer, because rust doesn't confess. People do, so you cleaned. Buckets of water, rags, sand for scrubbing. The floor was forever damp, no matter how often you scraped. Rats loved it. Apprentices hated it, but nobody questioned it twice. Other routine duties included errands. Yes, errands. Fetching candles, carrying messages, buying rope from the market without letting anyone ask too many questions. A day in the life could mean handling prisoners in the morning and haggling over wax prices in the afternoon. One poor recruit remembered walking into the market, and the seller asked cheerfully, "What do you need all this rope for?" He froze, then blurted, "Clothesline." The seller squinted. "That much?" "Yes, very big laundry." Not his best lie, but it worked. Apprentices also learned to work with judges and scribes. Judges barked orders, scribes wrote furiously, and you stood there hoping you didn't mishear. Mishearing could mean you reached for the wrong tool. Nobody forgot the rookie who grabbed a clamp instead of a chain and held it up like it was obvious. The room went silent. The judge snarled, "Do I look like I need a clamp right now?" Rookie rule: always double check. Torturers in training also discovered the glamorous world of scheduling. There were days when the judge decreed no sessions. Holy days, feast days, or just because he had indigestion. Those were supposed to be days off, but in reality, they became repair days. You hammered benches, patched ropes, checked stocks. Somehow, the tools got more rest than you did. Lunch breaks existed, but barely. Bread, cheese, maybe thin soup. You ate fast, hoping rats didn't join in. Sometimes prisoners muttered from the corner while you chewed. One allegedly asked, "Good soup?" The rookie answered, "Not really." The prisoner nodded. "Mine's worse." A weird moment of solidarity nobody wrote down. By the end of training, recruits realized the job wasn't a single task. It was dozens of small ones stacked together. Cleaning, budgeting, fetching, note-taking, sharpening, listening, and occasionally, yes, applying the skills everyone whispered about. But the city didn't care if you were versatile. The city cared if you showed up, kept the tools ready, and didn't embarrass the judge. Everything else was optional. After a year, most apprentices were hardened, not by cruelty, but by boredom. They'd seen more buckets of water than prisoners, more scribbles of accounts than cries for mercy. Torture was the headline, but paperwork was the article. Ask an apprentice what he remembered from year one, and you'd get something like, "The judge yelled, the clerk sighed, the ropes tangled, I scrubbed." That was training, not epic, not mythic, just routine piled on routine, until you either quit, or more likely, realized quitting wasn't allowed. Every torturer had that one case, the one neighbors whispered about for years, even if they pretended not to know you. For Hans, a city torturer in the records, it started with a chicken theft. Not glamorous, not scandalous, just a missing chicken. But the owner swore it wasn't Fox's. He blamed his neighbour. So the council turned a poultry problem into an interrogation. You got called in, not because the case needed you, but because the council thought, "We pay him anyway, might as well use him." That was how chicken justice escalated. The accused sat in the chair trembling. The clerk scratched his pen, ready for confessions about poultry. Hans stood there, rope in hand, trying not to laugh. "Did you take the chicken?" he asked. "No." "Then where is it?" "I don't know." The clerk looked up. "Make him know." Hans tugged the rope just enough to creak. The man panicked and shouted, "Fine, I borrowed it." "Borrowed?" Hans raised an eyebrow. "Yes, it laid eggs faster than mine. I meant to return it." The room went silent. The clerk sighed, muttered something about illegal borrowing, and wrote it all down. For weeks afterward, the town called Hans the Chicken Resolver. Not exactly terrifying, but memorable. Other torturers got splashier cases. In Florence, one woman claimed her husband bewitched her into loving him too much. A real complaint, written in trial notes. The judge laughed so hard, he dropped his ink. The torturer waiting nearby asked dryly, "So, what's the procedure for too much affection?" The judge waved him off. "Go oil the clamps, we won't need you." But sometimes, a case backfired. In one German city, a torturer got overeager. He tightened a rack so loudly, the entire street heard. Neighbours complained, not about cruelty, but about noise. The city fined him for disturbing the peace. Imagine explaining that to family. What happened at work? Got fined for being too loud. Some reputations improved, oddly enough, from restraint. One record mentions a torturer who stopped mid-session because the rope snapped. Instead of panicking, he calmly tied a knot, tested it, and carried on. The judge nodded approvingly, like he'd just witnessed fine carpentry. Word spread. He's reliable. Even his knots confessed cases could also change standing with the church. If you worked gently during Lent, priests noticed. If you ignored feast days, priests noticed louder. One torturer forgot the calendar entirely, and ended up in confession himself, stammering, "I didn't know it was Saint Lawrence's feast." The priest sighed, gave him 3 prayers, and reminded him not to multitask sin and schedules. The weirdest cases always turned into legends. In one town, a man swore he'd hidden treasure and would reveal it only under pressure. After 3 days, he finally confessed the treasure was a jar of pickles. The council was furious. The torturer shrugged. At least it wasn't onions again. From then on, townsfolk nicknamed him Pickle Master. Not terrifying, but you can't pick your legacy. Reputation spread fast in small towns. Kids dared each other. Touch the torturer's door, or he'll send you after chickens and pickles. Adults whispered at the market, "That's him, the one who, you know." They never said it loud, but everyone knew. One torturer joked with a prisoner once, mid-session, "Do you know what happened to the last man in this chair?" The prisoner, wide-eyed, whispered, "What?" "He confessed to borrowing a chicken." The man blinked, confused, then laughed despite himself. Even the clerk cracked a smile. History, reduced to paltry comedy. What made these cases important wasn't the outcome. It was the gossip. Torturers lived in silence most days. One big case, ridiculous or serious, suddenly gave neighbours something to whisper about. You weren't invisible anymore, just infamous. And once infamous, it stuck. Years later, nobody remembered the prisoner's name, but everyone remembered the chicken resolver, Pickle Master, or 2 loud hands. Your job became punchline and warning at once. That was the curse of the career. The moment you did anything memorable, it followed you longer than any contract. Your job doesn't just live in the basement, it follows you home, like a bad smell. The city pays you, yes, but everyone else pays you in side eyes. At the market, the baker greets customers cheerfully, until it's your turn. Then it's, bread, here." He slides the loaf across the counter like he's feeding a lion. You hand him coins. He doesn't touch your hand. He pokes them with a spoon, counts, and says, "Correct." Kids are less subtle. They invent games around you. Touch the torturer's wall and run. Or, say his name 3 times and your goat dies. One boy knocked on your door once, froze when you answered, and squeaked, "Wrong house," before bolting. For months his friends called him Brave Chicken. Adults gossip with more finesse, but it's still gossip. At the tavern, "Did you see him today?" "Yes," smelled of smoke again. "Maybe he sleeps in the dungeon." Laughter all around, until you step near the door. Then silence, mugs lifted, throats cleared. Ale suddenly becomes the most fascinating drink in history. The church is awkward too. Officially, you're necessary. Unofficially, you're that guy priests wish would confess less often. One priest once told you gently, "Sit at the back, my son. God sees you anyway." Translation: stay far enough that parishioners stop twitching. Festivals? You can attend, but don't expect dancing. The fiddler looks nervous if you approach the floor. Parents tug children away with fake excuses. No, we must check the cabbages. Cabbages become the safest excuse in town. Nicknames are inevitable. Nobody says official torturer. Too formal. They invent titles, some flattering, most not. After the chicken case, one man got feather collector. Another, after a noisy rack session, got squeaky hands. You don't get to pick your nickname. The town picks it for you. And once picked, it sticks harder than tar. Sometimes people test your patience. A drunk once staggered up, slurring, "Hey, can you tighten my mother-in-law?" The crowd laughed. You didn't. You just stared, until he stumbled away muttering. The next morning, rumour said you cursed his ale supply. He drank water for a month, terrified. Family life? Complicated. Your wife gets polite smiles, but no invitations. Your kids sit at the edge of school groups. One teacher once called roll Peter, son of the smith. Anna, daughter of the baker. Carl, son of the torturer. Silence. Then giggles. Poor Carl sank in his seat. Even shopkeepers improvise ways to avoid saying it. The tailor once handed you trousers and said, "For your line of work." He wouldn't say the word, as if fabric would burst into flames if torturer touched his lips. But it's not all cold shoulders. Some folks secretly find you useful. The innkeeper once whispered, "Can you scare a debtor for me?" You refused, but the story spread anyway. Suddenly everyone assumed you offered side services. Part-time torturer, part-time debt collector. The weirdest part? Strangers sometimes respect you more than neighbours do. Travellers hear you're the torturer and nod solemnly, like you're a guardian of order. Locals? They just mutter, "Smells like oil again." There's also bureaucracy to thank for your reputation. Every ledger, every record. Your name scribbled next to purchases, ropes, oil, candles. Townsfolk peek at the books and snicker. See? He's buying rope again. Must be a busy week. You become gossip, fueled by receipts. One day, the fishmonger slipped. "That'll be 2 coins taught." Sir." You raised an eyebrow. He panicked. "I meant tall, sir. You're tall, your average height." The entire market laughed for days. He avoided you until winter, and yet life rolls on. You still walk the same muddy streets. You still eat the same stale bread. You still nod politely to neighbours, who won't nod back. The legacy isn't grand statues or songs. It's whispers, bad nicknames, and kids daring each other to poke your door. If you're remembered, it's not for upholding justice. It's for being the guy who couldn't buy cabbage without everyone holding their breath. That's the footprint you leave. Not noble, not tragic, just absurd enough that people remember. Walk into a European museum and you'll spot them instantly. Medieval torture devices, displayed in glass, under perfect lighting, with dramatic captions. The irony? Half the tools look like regular hardware. If you squint, it's just Home Depot, but shinier. One case holds rusty iron collars. To a visitor, it screams horror. To a medieval carpenter, it probably screamed, "Oh great, more metal hoops I need to fit." Another display. Chains, not elaborate, just chains. If you replace the sign, it could say farm equipment, and nobody would argue. Tourists point and whisper. A kid once said loudly, "Is that for giants?" The guide smiled politely and muttered, "No, that's just a chair." The kid looked disappointed. He expected monsters, not furniture. That's the thing. So many torture artifacts look boring up close. A wooden bench, a pair of pliers, a rope. You could swap them with a blacksmith's workshop, and no one would notice. The scary part isn't the tool, it's the context. Still, curators lean into drama. The placards say things like, "Used in grisly interrogations." But the object itself? A bucket. Visitors squint. Really? A bucket? Yes. Water torture sometimes involved buckets. Also, buckets sometimes involved carrying water. Multi-purpose technology. Archaeologists occasionally find rooms too. Cellars under town halls. Stone basements under churches. The moment they see chains or dark stains, they whisper, "Dungeon." Locals nod, even if later tests say, "Actually, wine cellar." Too late. The rumour always wins. One site in Germany uncovered a small room with iron hooks on the wall. The report called it a detention chamber. The local kids called it the hook room and dared each other to sneak in at night. When asked what they expected, one shrugged. Maybe ghosts, or sausages. Nobody found either. In France, a dig found a wooden chair with metal bands. The museum labelled it interrogation seat. A local carpenter snorted, "Looks like my uncle's workshop stool." He wasn't wrong. Archaeology can be disappointing if you expected spikes everywhere. That doesn't stop theories. Every rusty object has a chance of being rebranded as sinister. A cracked barrel hoop, shackles, a bent saw, interrogation blade, a broken ladder, restraint device. Sometimes the imagination works harder than the evidence. Visitors love the mystery, though. They lean in close, whispering like the objects might wake up. A father once told his son, "Don't touch the chain, it remembers." The sun touched it anyway. Nothing happened, except the sun bragged about it all day. Some artifacts even become tourist mascots. One museum shows a massive key, just a key, nothing fancy. The guide calls it the key to the dungeon. Visitors snap photos like it's Excalibur. It probably just opened a door that squeaked, worse than your grandma's knees. But not every discovery is boring. Sometimes archaeologists uncover graffiti scratched into stone, names, dates, crude drawings. One wall had tally marks, someone literally counting days. Another had what looked suspiciously like a badly drawn goat. Prison art hasn't changed much. Mostly doodles, occasionally terrible. Museum staff get questions constantly. Was this used for executions? No, that's a cooking pot. Ah, but could it have been used for executions? Technically, yes, if you tried hard enough. The funniest part, some famous devices might not even be medieval. The so-called Iron Maiden, likely 18th century invention, designed more for tourist shivers than actual use. But try telling that to visitors. They nod, then still pose for photos. The myth is stronger than the fact. Even chains with no proven story get power. People stare, whisper, imagine. A visitor once leaned in and whispered to his friend, "What if it's cursed?" His friend rolled his eyes. "It's just metal." Then the first guy tripped over the rope barrier. Perfect timing. The curse theory won that round. For locals, the finds are less exotic. Oh, they found another cellar. Great. More tourists. But kids still dare each other to sneak down and shout. Adults pretend not to care. Secretly they brag. Yes, our town has a dungeon. Very historic. Please buy cheese before you leave. That's the afterlife of torture rooms and tools. Not grandeur, not mystery. Just awkward objects reborn as exhibits, paired with souvenir shops. Visitors leave whispering. Locals leave with ticket money. The tools themselves, still just chains, buckets and chairs. And somewhere in the archives, the old clerk is rolling his eyes. I listed that as rope expenses, not dark legend. If you want to know how torture worked, don't stare at the rusted chains. Stare at the ink stains. Medieval justice lived on paper. Clerks wrote everything down. Every rope, every candle, every coin. If you expected sinister poetry, sorry. What you get looks like shopping lists written by someone with terrible handwriting. One surviving note says, 2 ropes, 1 stool, 3 candles, onions for supper. Congratulations, you just read both a torture inventory and someone's dinner prep. Another account book lists oil for chains, nails for bench, wine for the judge. Imagine balancing that budget. You're a clerk in a freezing hall, trying to make numbers add up. Tools, check. Snacks, check. Justice, apparently fueled by wine. The language was dry by design. No clerk ever wrote, purchased terrifying device. They wrote, iron object, weight 4 pounds, which could mean shackles or a frying pan. Centuries later, historians squint at the page and wonder, did someone confess, or did someone just cook? Orders from judges weren't better. Some sound like vague recipes. Apply gentle pressure, but not too gentle. Thanks, Your Honour. The torturer had to guess if gentle meant a firm tug or an awkward pat. Repairs pop up constantly. One clerk scribbled, rope snapped, session delayed. Somewhere in that courtroom, a prisoner cheered a little too soon. The torturer cursed. The judge scowled. The clerk just dipped his pen again. Some notes show real personality. In one margin, remind torturer not to leave bucket behind again. Translation, someone kept forgetting their tools, like a distracted carpenter. Another, clamp misplaced. Bureaucracy never forgave sloppy housekeeping. You can imagine the dialogue. Judge, do we have the necessary equipment? Clerk, all except 1 stool. Torturer, I'll fix it later. Judge, fix it now. That wasn't drama. That was an office meeting with worse snacks. Payment records were even stranger. A torturer might earn the same fee as the man who fixed the town well. Both crucial, both messy. Sometimes you see bonuses. Extra pay for extended session. Congratulations, you just discovered medieval overtime. Then there were the odd supplies. Purchase, nails, chalk, sack. No explanation. Did the chalk draw lines? Did the sack hold tools? Or chickens? No one knows, but the town paid anyway. Confession transcripts exist too, and they are rarely grand. One reads, "Yes, I stole the pig, but it was my pig." Another, "I saw the devil, but maybe it was a goat." Imagine trying not to laugh while writing that down. Some clerks clearly struggled. Notes like, "Confession unclear, repeat question." Translation, the prisoner mumbled or the torturer muttered, and the clerk gave up halfway. Medieval shorthand for what? Errors slip in too. One record, prisoner confessed to murder. Crossed out, replaced. Correction, theft of bread. Imagine explaining that typo. "Sorry, sir, didn't mean to call you a murderer, just a carb thief." And yet these documents ruled the city. If it wasn't on paper, it didn't count. The rope made people talk, but the quill decided what survived. Judges trusted ink more than witnesses. Tourists today gawk at these records behind glass, whispering like they're cursed. But the truth? They're paperwork, endless receipts. One historian joked, medieval justice was 50% intimidation, 50% administration. Honestly, he was generous. Some days it looks 80% paperwork, 20% squeaky rope. And clerks had humour, whether they meant to or not. At the bottom of a page, wine gone. Buy more right under a confession to witchcraft. Priorities, clearly. Locals at the time probably groaned at the bureaucracy. Picture it, the torturer ready to go home, but the clerk won't stop asking questions. Clerk, describe the sound of the wheel. Torturer, it squeaks. Clerk, high squeak or low squeak? Torturer, it squeaks. Somewhere in the corner, the prisoner mutters, "It squeaks a lot." Everyone agrees except the clerk, who wants it in Latin. Sometimes the records reveal casual chaos. One entry notes, "Session postponed, judge ill." Translation, "Stomach problems outrank justice." Another says, "Session delayed due to rain." Apparently, weather could stop interrogation, faster than mercy ever did. And centuries later, archaeologists uncover these dusty pages, squint at the Latin, and announce evidence of medieval practice. When really, it's evidence of office workers who couldn't resist doodling notes about missing buckets. That's the funny part. We expect sinister secrets. What survives looks like accounting. Torture was terrifying in the moment, but in the archives, it's receipts, typos, and scribbles about onions. Torturers didn't just show up with tools, they came with accessories. In some towns, you wore a leather apron. Practical, sure, kept clothes clean. But to neighbours, it became a uniform. See a man in leather apron walking past? Nobody thought, butcher. They whispered, "Ah, the torturer," even if you were just buying bread. Some records mention hoods, not to hide your identity. Everyone knew who you were, but because someone decided a hood made you look official, like a medieval dress code. One clerk wrote, "Apron supplied, hood repaired," basically HR keeping track of costumes. But not every city bothered. Some torturers just wore normal clothes, which almost made it worse. People expected spooky uniforms. Instead, it was just Hans in his Sunday shirt, holding a rope, creepy in its own way. Housing rules added to the strangeness. Many torturers lived at the edge of town, near tanners or butchers, not because of smell, though there was plenty, but because neighbours didn't want them next door. Imagine house shopping and hearing. Great location, but the torturer's family lives upstairs. Suddenly the rent feels too high. One record even notes the city gave a torturer free lodging by the moat. Translation, congratulations, you now live next to mosquitoes. Civic generosity at its finest. Church rituals made it trickier. Some parishes allowed torturers to attend mass, but only from the back row. One priest explained, "It prevents distraction." Really, it just kept people from turning around mid-sermon and whispering. Other places banned them from communion altogether. One torturer apparently asked, "So, no bread and wine for me?" The priest coughed and muttered, "Better safe than sorry." Villagers invented their own rituals around torturers too. Kids dared each other. Touch his apron and live. Some claimed the leather was cursed. One boy bragged he touched it once, and later found 2 extra eggs in his chicken coop. Proof, apparently, of dark powers. Markets developed their own codes. Sellers sometimes wrapped goods twice before handing them over, as if an extra layer of cloth could protect them from bad luck. A butcher once muttered, "Here's your meat, and here's your blessing." The torturer blinked. "Thanks?" And then there was symbolism. People thought tools had moods. A sharp rope meant justice was coming. A rusty chain meant justice was asleep. One woman swore she could tell if the torturer was busy, just by listening for the hammering of repairs. "Ah, he's oiling the wheel again," she told neighbours, like she was predicting rain. Of course, plenty of this was just gossip. But gossip was culture. Rumours travelled faster than carts. Someone spotted the torturer carrying a bucket, and by sunset, the whole town whispered about new methods. Spoiler, the bucket was for water. Mistrust turned into little traditions. In some towns, people crossed themselves when passing the torturer's door. In others, they spat on the ground, quietly, so he wouldn't notice. Kids made songs, rhyming your name with ridiculous words. No matter how grim the job, the rhyme always won. Family life didn't escape symbolism either. A torturer's children were seen as half-cursed, which meant fewer playmates, but more dares. "Bet you won't eat lunch with the torturer's son." One girl did. Nothing happened, except she got called bravest in class for a week. Not every ritual was negative. Some towns gave torturers extra meat at feasts, like hazard pay in food form. Records mention meat allowance as part of salary. Imagine lining up at the festival, and the butcher whispers, "Bigger slice for you, don't tell anyone." Still, the overall vibe was useful but untouchable. Half civic employee, half spooky mascot. One judge summed it up in a note: essential yet to be avoided. That could also describe garlic, but here it meant you. Centuries later, archaeologists dig up aprons, hoods, and odd household items. The museum signs say, "Symbolic garment of the torturer." Visitors stare, imagining rituals. But the truth, it was just laundry. Someone washed it, someone mended it, someone complained about the smell. That's the strange thing about cultural perception. It wasn't statues or laws that shaped how people saw you. It was aprons, seating charts, neighbourhood rumours, and kids daring each other to poke your door. And somewhere in the background, the clerk scribbled, "Hood repaired, apron patched, bucket misplaced again." Every museum has that one-star attraction. Usually, it's the Iron Maiden, a tall metal coffin with spikes inside. Tourists gasp, guides lower their voices, and someone whispers, "Imagine being shut in there." Here's the twist: historians now think it's fake, not medieval. More like an 18th century prop, designed to scare visitors. In other words, the original clickbait. The irony? The Iron Maiden works better as a story than as an object. It never had to be real. People loved imagining it too much to check the dates. A clerk never wrote, "Purchased spiky coffin." The accounts show ropes, candles, nails, not giant death boxes. Other devices suffer the same fate. Spiky chairs, pear-shaped gags, wheels with suspiciously artistic drawings. Many were assembled centuries later from random scrap. A bent saw gets labelled execution tool. A broken ladder becomes a punishment frame. One archaeologist sighed. Half this museum is just creative recycling. The public, of course, eats it up. A rusty collar is boring, but call it the witch's collar, and suddenly everyone lines up for photos. A visitor once asked, Is this really authentic? The guide hesitated, then said, Authentic enough, which is medieval speak for, please don't ruin the tour. Even genuine finds spark debate. A heavy boot with straps? Is it a torture shoe, or just protective gear for a blacksmith? One group of experts argued for weeks. Finally, a farmer visiting the exhibit said, Looks like my work boots. Nobody wanted that answer, but it fit. Some archaeologists admit the problem openly. Objects get sensational labels because wooden stool with iron nails doesn't sell tickets. Instrument of interrogation does. Marketing wins, accuracy loses. Locals sometimes mock the drama. In one German town, the cellar under the old hall has plain hooks in the wall. The museum sign calls them detention restraints. Grandparents tell their grandkids, those were for hanging sausages. Both stories circulate. Kids believe the sausage version because it comes with snacks. Visitors also create their own theories. One tourist stood in front of a chain and whispered, It radiates dark energy. His wife rolled her eyes. It radiates rust. Guess which version he posted online? The mystery sells best when gaps exist. A cracked jug in a cellar might just be a jug. Add a dramatic caption. Used in sinister water punishments. Suddenly, the jug becomes famous. Archaeologists joke that if you find anything rusty in Europe, you can label it possibly torture, and people will nod. Sometimes museums get caught. One curator admitted the famous spike mask was probably a carnival prop. Did attendance drop? Nope. People still come, shrug, and say, Well, it looks scary. That's enough. It's not just props, it's the myths too. Travellers centuries ago spread wild stories. A French visitor once wrote that German towns used iron maidens, racks and boiling oil daily. Locals at the time probably laughed. Boiling oil was expensive. Who wastes it on interrogations? When bread needed frying? Even graffiti gets reinterpreted. Tally marks on a wall. Prisoners' days or just a bored guard's doodle? A crude drawing of a face, sign of suffering, or bad artwork. One archaeologist wrote, Unclear? Tourists prefer secret prisoner code? The funniest part? Sometimes the myths are scarier than the truth. Real torture was often boring. Ropes, cold rooms, waiting. But boredom doesn't sell postcards, so the spiky coffin wins. Dialogues break the illusion too. Picture a museum guard overhearing tourists. Tourist. They used this every day, right? Guard. Actually, no evidence they used it at all. Tourist. Still cool though. Guard. Sure, just don't lean on it. It's wobbly, and yet the myths stick. Even when signs admit probable 18th century reconstruction, visitors ignore the footnote. They lean closer, take photos, and shiver. The Iron Maiden doesn't need history. It has vibes. Local kids, of course, don't buy it. They dare each other to sneak into the museum at night and sit inside the Maiden. Nobody ever lasts long, because the thing smells of rust and pigeon droppings. Not exactly a legendary aura. So when people talk about the mystery of medieval torture, half of it is props, half of it is exaggeration, and the rest is tourists who want a spooky selfie. The real mystery? Why anyone thought spikes inside a coffin made sense logistically. Hard to interrogate someone when they're already kebab. People often imagine the torturer as some shadowy figure making choices in the dark. Reality check. He didn't decide much. Orders came from upstairs, literally and figuratively. Judges, clerks, city councillors, even priests sat around big wooden tables, debating like medieval office managers. A typical day began not with screams, but with discussions. The judge cleared his throat, adjusted his robe, and announced, "Shall we proceed with stronger measures?" He said it in the same tone someone else might use to order more bread at lunch. The clerk, buried in scrolls, answered, "We can, but only if 3 witnesses disagree." Everyone groaned. Another technicality. Justice moved at the speed of paperwork. Sometimes the church stepped in too. A priest wagged his finger. "Not today, it's Saint Michael's feast." The judge sighed, turned to the torturer and muttered, "Put the ropes away." Divine calendar management in action. Dialogues could be absurdly specific. Judge, what is the crime? Clerk, theft of pig. Judge, big pig or small pig? Clerk, small. Judge, still counts. Meanwhile, the torturer stood in the corner with his toolkit, wondering why pig size was a legal category. Money often entered the debate. City council members treated interrogations like budget meetings. "Can we afford more candles?" one asked. Another suggested dimming the lights. "Cheaper that way." "Darker too. Bonus intimidation at no cost." Nobles added their own priorities. A duke once popped his head in and grumbled, "Make it quick. I've got dinner at 7, nothing kills judicial gravitas, like roast goose waiting in the hall." Clerks kept minutes of these debates, and the records sound painfully boring. One note says, "Decision delayed due to lack of ink." Imagine a prisoner chained in the next room, spared for the day because the quill broke. The torturer? A glorified stagehand. He didn't speak unless spoken to. One story claims a judge ended court early. "We'll continue tomorrow." The torturer protested, "But I've already set everything up." The judge waved him off. Set-up time wasn't billable. Sometimes they forgot him completely. He'd stand by the wall like furniture until someone finally barked, "You, bring the stool." No name, no courtesy, just you. Bribes made everything messier. Rich families slipped gifts under the table, sacks of flour, bottles of wine, even chickens. One official allegedly kept poultry under his desk. Evidence by day, dinner by night. Locals loved gossiping about these decisions. At the market, people whispered, "They tortured him because he mocked the mayor's boots." Maybe true, maybe not, but believable enough. Everyone respected Boots. Notaries had the hardest job. They had to write every single word, no matter how ridiculous. Their wrists ached, ink splattered, patience snapped. One margin note reads, "Confession too long, summarized for clarity." Translation: the prisoner wouldn't shut up. Errors were common. A clerk once wrote, "Confessed to murder," then crossed it out and replaced it with, "Correction, theft of bread." Slight difference. Nobody sang ballads about carb theft. Meanwhile, the torturer leaned against the wall, bored. A guard joked, "You're paid to wait, not to think." He wasn't wrong. Hours passed before orders came. Even when they did, instructions were vague. Judges declared, "Proceed with moderate pressure." Moderate, as if justice came in sizes, small, medium, large. The torturer had to guess what moderate meant. Tug half as hard, ask politely first. No handbook explained it. One can imagine his inner monologue. If I overdo it, I'm punished. If I underdo it, I'm punished. Perfect, but he never said it out loud. Silence kept you employed. Delays happened constantly. One record says, "Session postponed, judge unwell." Another, "Cancelled due to rain." Apparently, damp roads outranked crime. The torturer just packed up and went home early, unpaid. Sometimes debates dragged on so long, the torturer nodded off. A clerk once wrote, "Interrogation paused, assistant asleep." Not exactly a heroic legacy. Through it all, the torturer stayed invisible. Judges argued, clerks scribbled, nobles bargained, priests interfered. By the time ropes came out, the real drama had already happened at the table, with quills and calendars. That's the irony. Medieval justice was less about dungeon screams, and more about endless office chatter. The torturer wasn't mastermind, or villain. He was the last cog in a squeaky machine, run by men who argued about pig sizes and candle budgets. Life in a medieval city had 2 floors. Upstairs, nobles dined like kings. Downstairs, torturers dined like, well, torturers. Court records gush about banquets, roasted swans carried in by servants, tables sagging under pies stuffed with venison, bowls of almonds glazed with honey. Wine flowed like a leaky roof. Musicians strummed, jugglers tossed, and half the guests were already tipsy before the second course. Meanwhile, in the cellar, the menu was less poetic. A slab of bread tough enough to qualify as a weapon. Cheese with the texture of wax. If fortune smiled, a thin soup flavoured with more water than anything else. One apprentice poked his bowl once and whispered, "I think this is just warm rain." His mentor sighed. "Drink it. Rain doesn't come salted." The difference wasn't just food, it was everything. Nobles used golden goblets. Torturers clutched wooden cups patched with wax. Nobles dropped knives and laughed. Torturers dropped coins and swore. At a feast, spilling wine was funny. In the cellar, spilling soup was tragedy. Fashion told the same story. Elites shimmered in velvet and fur, feathers stuck proudly in hats. Torturers wore leather aprons, mended so many times they looked like patchwork maps. A clerk once joked, "You look like a walking tablecloth." The torturer didn't laugh. Even lighting was unfair. Upstairs, 100 candles blazing, shadows dancing like theatre. Downstairs, one smoky torch that hissed every time someone coughed. Music floated down, but by the time it reached the basement it was warped, muffled, like someone strangling a lute. The torturer chewed stale bread to the beat of distorted nobility. Conversations couldn't be more different. Above, nobles bragged, "I hunted 3 deer last week. My cousin bought land. Have you tried the almond pie?" Below, the chat went, "Do you think the rope will snap today? Which bucket still leaks? Anyone seen the good stool?" Same city, different soundtrack. Dialogues captured the absurd divide. Noble, "Bring more wine." Servant, "At once, my lord." Torturer, "Bring more water." Guard, "Why?" Torturer, "The floor is sticky again." Even leftovers showed contrast. Nobles tossed scraps to dogs. Torturers saved crumbs for supper. A story survives of one torturer pocketing a half-eaten apple from the council chamber. His kid at home declared it the best feast ever. Entertainment upstairs was all spectacle. Dancers, poets, maybe a trained bear if the budget stretched. Downstairs, entertainment meant listening to a clerk stumble through confessions. "Yes, I stole a pig, maybe 2 pigs." Not quite theatre material. And yet, nobles sometimes peeked into the cellar mid-feast. Half drunk, they'd wander down, with wine still in hand. "How's the work going?" they slurred, eyeing the tools like tourists at a sideshow. The torturer forced a polite nod, thinking, "You left a goose leg upstairs. I can smell it." Paychecks confirmed the gap. Banquets cost entire pages of silver. Torturers' wages sat at the bottom of the list, squeezed between candles and bucket repair. In one ledger, under expenses for eel pie, the next line reads, "Payment for torturer." A menu and a payroll in the same ink. The biggest insult? Timing. While nobles toasted past midnight, the torturer had to be up early. Tools cleaned, ropes coiled, water fetched. You didn't stumble into work with wine breath. You showed up on time, smelling of smoke, ready to follow orders. Sometimes the two worlds collided. A noble stumbled downstairs after dinner, pointing at a stool. "What's this?" "A chair," the torturer deadpanned. "Yes, my lord, but not for sitting." The noble laughed, slapped his back, and left, never realising the stool was broken anyway. The symbolism didn't escape anyone. 2 halves of the same city, one glittering with candles, the other dripping with damp. Nobles strutted in light. Torturers slogged in shadows. The only thing they shared? The same roof. Still, gossip blurred the line. Servants carried rumours down with the trays. The duke spilled wine on his robe. The lady fainted from too much pie. Torturers grinned quietly. At least someone else had humiliations too. Yet envy rarely took root. Torturers didn't dream of swans and velvet. They dreamed of boots without holes, bread that didn't chip teeth, maybe one evening without rats squeaking during dinner. Small luxuries, but luxuries nonetheless. That's the odd beauty of the records. Banquet menus survive, listing delicacies that made nobles proud. Expense sheets survive, listing onions and rope for the seller. Together, they tell the real story. Two worlds stacked on top of each other, never equal, always connected, and once in a while, a crumb of almond cake accidentally fell down the stairwell. That, more than any official paycheck, felt like justice. If justice was paperwork for officials, it was graffiti and gossip for everyone else. Walls in town squares carried their own records. Someone carved, "Peter cried like a goat at the post." Another wrote, "Don't steal bread here, unless you like splinters." Not official minutes, but more fun to read. One butcher scratched into the wood of his stall. "Best view last Thursday." 2 lashes and a shoe broke free advertising. "Come for the meat, stay for the punishment recap." Kids drew doodles too. A crude stick figure with a big nose labelled "Thief." Another with crossed eyes and messy hair. "Liar." Parents scolded them. Kids insisted. "We're practicing letters." The market turned into a rumour mill after every show. Housewives huddled around baskets of onions. "Did you hear?" The prisoner begged for beer instead of mercy. A fishmonger chimed in. "Makes sense, beer's cheaper than forgiveness." Laughter followed, mixed with fish guts. Some notes were almost poetic, but not quite. On a barn door, "Justice smells like smoke and garlic." Nobody knew who wrote it, but everyone nodded. Garlic was everywhere. Vendors made announcements like sports commentators. "Step right up. Today we've got a thief with fast feet. Will he trip again?" Someone actually kept betting pools. 2 lashes before tears, or 3. Losers paid in bread rolls. Dialogues overheard in the crowd were brutal. Woman, "That's Marta's cousin." Man, "Really?" Woman, "Yes." Family discount doesn't apply, though even animals became part of the chatter. A goose flapped near the platform once, honking louder than the prisoner. The next day graffiti appeared. The goose was braver. Shopkeepers recycled the events into sales pitches. A brewer yelled, "Drink here, cheaper than a fine." A tailor bragged, "Our ropes don't snap mid-show." Marketing was savage. Not everyone found it thrilling. One farmer grumbled, "I came for justice, got mud on my boots instead." His neighbour replied, "At least you didn't get justice on your back." Street songs sprouted overnight. Kids chanted, "Steal an egg, get a peg. Steal a pie, don't ask why." The rhyme didn't make sense, but it stuck in your head worse than any sermon. A carpenter scrawled near the square, "Next time, build higher stage." Couldn't see free architectural critique, courtesy of public humiliation. Sometimes gossip turned punishments into legends. A boy whipped for stealing apples became Apple King. Years later, old men still said, "Remember the Apple King?" Nobody recalled his real name. Rumours also stretched reality. Someone claimed a thief confessed to stealing the mayor's wig. In truth, he stole bread. But the wig story was funnier, so it spread. The mayor never lived it down. And of course, wages flew. A baker bet his neighbour, "He'll faint by lash 5. The neighbour said, "No, by lash 8. The loser had to buy beer. In that sense, punishments fueled both justice and tavern profits. Some graffiti mocked the officials directly. "The judge snores," or "the drummer was off beat." Even authority couldn't escape doodles. One of the sharpest comments was scratched onto a fence. "Punishment, free show, no refunds." Locals started repeating it, as if it were a slogan. Prisoners themselves sometimes added flavour. One man shouted mid-whipping, "Tell my wife I regret nothing." A voice from the crowd answered, "She already remarried." Half the town laughed, the other half gasped. The rituals of gossip kept the system alive more than the whips did. Fear mattered, but so did the stories. People remembered the nicknames, the one-liners, the doodles on wood. If you wanted to know what really happened, you didn't read the judge's notes. You checked barn walls, tavern songs, and what kids screamed while chasing chickens. That was the people's archive, messy, funny, and unforgettable. Medieval justice didn't run on laws alone. It ran on habit. And once a habit got rolling, the whole town joined in. By midweek, someone always asked, "Who's getting tied up tomorrow?" as casually as if they were asking about the weather. Nobody admitted they enjoyed it, but if you skipped the square, people asked if you were sick. Posters weren't printed, so announcements travelled by shouting. A boy ran through the market yelling, "Punishment at noon," the same way kids now shout about ice cream carts. People groaned, then started planning snacks. Tavern walls doubled as calendars. Someone scribbled, "Thursday, whipping." Bring stool next to it, another hand added, "Don't forget dice for betting." Practical reminders, etched in chalk. Routine infected playtime. Children tied each other to fences, shouting, "Confess," or "We'll tickle you." Parents sighed, "Stop copying the square." The kids insisted, "We're training for real life." Medieval career day. Even livestock caught on. Dogs barked at drum rolls. Chickens scattered whenever the crowd formed. And one goat achieved local fame by following every parade. Justice Goat, they called him. Someone even carved graffiti. "The goat never lies." Adults turned it into jokes too. A market rhyme went, Monday shortbread, Tuesday long debt, Wednesday screams loud, Thursday gossip spread. It wasn't Shakespeare, but it got repeated until everyone's ears rang. Taverns found gold in the cycle. They sold punishment stew on show days. Yesterday's scraps boiled with water. Customers groaned, "Tastes like despair," and ordered seconds. Drinks named the Lash and Post Ale sold well too. Even the performers of justice, the drummers, slipped into routine. One griped, "Two beats I know, weddings and punishments. Guess which fills my purse." Another said, "If I drum faster, will they scream in rhythm?" His captain told him to shut up. Mistakes only made the cycle stronger. A rope snapped once. Instead of shock, someone yelled, "Classic Wednesday!" The crowd roared with laughter, then watched as guards fixed it and carried on like nothing happened. Graffiti kept the sarcasm alive. On one wall, "Different thief, same tears." On another, "Cheaper than theatre, louder than church." Tourists must have thought it was dark poetry. Locals knew it was customer reviews. Families passed down stories like heirlooms. Grandparents pointed at the stage. "That's where your uncle fainted." Kids rolled their eyes. "Yes, we know. Every week you tell us." Local history turned into bedtime stories nobody asked for. Songs grew out of repetition. Drunks sang in taverns. "Whip today, fines tomorrow. Steal a loaf, repay in sorrow." The verses shifted nightly, but the chorus was always loud. The main reason the cycle lasted, it was cheap. Ropes, a post, a drum. Maintenance cost less than building new walls. Yeah, on a budget. But humour started to chip away at fear. Market chatter turned sarcastic. "I'd rather take 3 lashes than sit through martyrs singing." "Better whipped than paying the miller's prices." Laughter softened the dread. Sometimes ridicule landed on the officials too. Someone painted on a barn. Judge snores, drummer snores louder. Another doodle showed guards chasing a pig instead of a thief. People laughed harder at that drawing than at the real punishments. Rumours exaggerated everything. A pickpocket once fainted after 2 lashes. By evening, the story was, he fainted before the whip touched him. By next week, it became, he fainted at the sight of rope. Embarrassment multiplied faster than rabbits. Vendors also piled on. A cheesemonger advertised, "Our cheese lasts longer than your dignity." A brewer shouted, "Cheaper than a fine." Business thrived on sarcasm, yet the machine kept spinning. Guards marched, drums beat, ropes swung. Crowds jeered, laughed, and bought pies. By nightfall, everyone went home, ready to repeat the cycle next week. Change crept in slowly. Merchants complained punishments blocked stalls. Priests whined that nobody listened to sermons, only to screams. Councils began muttering, maybe fines were simpler, less noise, less mess. When public lashings were reduced, townsfolk sulked. One man moaned, "What do we do on Wednesdays now?" His neighbour suggested, "Laundry." The man scowled. "That's not entertaining." New graffiti captured the mood. Justice now payable in coins. Yawn apparently, paperwork was less satisfying than a goat chewing ropes. Still, old habits lingered. Even after reforms, taverns served whip stew for nostalgia. Grandfathers still bragged, "Back in my day, we booed louder." Young folks rolled their eyes. Yes, and you also thought garlic cured curses. Eventually, platforms rotted, posts turned into firewood, graffiti washed away by rain. Justice Goat vanished from parades, leaving behind only legend, and Wednesday became just Wednesday. The cycle didn't end with revolution or fireworks. It ended with yawns, sarcasm, and reform laws stacked on dusty shelves. People moved on. Markets sold onions without whips in the background. Taverns invented new jokes. That's how medieval justice faded, not with thunder, but with boredom.